I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome back to the Sooner Nation podcast. Today in this episode, we're going to dive into an Oklahoma athletic program that isn't just competing, it's evolving from men's basketball, making a bold, forward-thinking move into the postseason, to a football team that's going into the spring, rebuilding for another college football playoff run, maybe. Softball. It just might be the most dangerous Patty Gasso's ever put together. And then you got to look at 2027 football recruiting. This is a class that's also starting to feel historic. So this isn't just about what Oklahoma is right now. This is about what this Sooners athletic program is becoming. So let's just jump into all of this. Let's start here, because I think this matters more than just one postseason decision, right? Oklahoma's basketball team, the men's team, they didn't just choose a different tournament in March. I think they chose a different future. Obviously, they were left out, right? Left on the outside of the NCAA tournament, close enough to feel it, just not close enough to claim it. They had a decision to make. You accept a bid to the NIT. That's the traditional fallback. It has been for decades. Or you step into something new, something that's a little bit unproven and, frankly, maybe just a little bit controversial, the college basketball crown in Las Vegas. And look, make no mistake about this. This wasn't a coin flip decision for Oklahoma. This was calculated. It was strategic, and it might end up being one of the most important decisions that Porter Moser has made since arriving in Norman. Let's not dance around it, okay? The biggest reason Oklahoma chose the crown is simple. Money. M-O-N-E-Y. That's it. But not in the way college basketball has traditionally operated. The crown offers $500,000 as an NIL prize pool, not to the university, not to the athletic department. This goes straight to the players. And that changes everything. If Oklahoma wins this tournament, it's going to be around $300,000 that will be split across the roster. So even if you get to the semifinals, you're guaranteed $50,000. That's real money. That's immediate. That's tangible. That is money in that locker room with those players. And you compare that to the NIT, where payouts are minimal, right? They go back to the school as well. But what Oklahoma is essentially saying here is this: we understand what college basketball is now. Because in 2026, roster management, it's not about culture and develop. It's about retention. It's about the transfer portal. It's about whether your best players stick around for another year or whether they cash out somewhere else. And that's what's happened because Oklahoma wouldn't invest. But this tournament, it gives Oklahoma something that they've never really had before in this space that occupies the postseason. Suddenly, Oklahoma has some leverage. You're not just making or asking players to buy into a vision. You're showing them a return on their investment. And if you don't think recruits and current players are paying attention to that, then you're the one not paying attention to this sport. So let's talk about the basketball side of this, though, because there is a misconception floating around that this is a flashy alternative to the NIT. And it's not. The crown is built differently. This field is made up entirely of high major programs, the kind of teams that Oklahoma is trying to measure itself against every single night in the SEC. You look at the bracket, you got Baylor there, Creighton's there, West Virginia, Minnesota, Stanford. That's not a step down. That's a continuation of the grind. And for Oklahoma, that matters. Because if you're trying to build an NCAA tournament team, not just make it to the tournament, but to stay there, you need to prove that you can beat teams like this in March environments. You got neutral floor, you got quick turnaround, national television. And that's what this is. And oh, by the way, every single game is on Fox or FS1. You got prime windows, you got big stages. You're going to play these games in like T-Mobile Arena, the MGM Grand Garden Arena, right there in Las Vegas. So instead of fading into the background of the NIT, where, let's be honest, national attention has definitely slipped in recent years, Oklahoma's stepping into a spotlight. Not accidental. This is branding. This is exposure. This is a program saying, if we're going to play in March, then we're going to play somewhere where we can be seen. Now, here's where this decision gets really interesting, because it's not just about this year. It's about what comes next. There's a blueprint here, and it comes from last year's crown champion. You look at Nebraska. They win the inaugural tournament, 2025. And then the next season, they're dancing. Now, that's not just a coincidence. That's momentum. And that's what Oklahoma is trying to replicate. Because right now, this program, this Oklahoma basketball program, is in a fragile space. They're not rebuilding, but they're not irrelevant. They're just hanging right there. They're good enough to compete. They're not quite consistent enough to break through. And that's a dangerous place to live in college basketball, because it's where rosters turn over, where frustration begins to build, and where almost just becomes your identity. So what do? You create a moment. You create stakes. You create something your players can rally around that feels like more than just a postseason participation trophy. And that's what the Crown offers, a chance to win something that is real, a chance to build confidence, a chance to enter the offseason not with questions, but with belief. Because all this, look, it all sounds good in theory. But then April 1st, it becomes very real. Oklahoma starts with Colorado, got a quarterfinal game, 7 o'clock Central Time. It's going to be on FS1. And here's the reality. If Oklahoma wins this, there's only 8 teams. If Oklahoma wins this, they're immediately in a semifinal against probably Baylor, maybe Minnesota, I don't know. But that's another high-level test, another opportunity to stack credibility. If they lose, well, then, all of this, the strategy, the messaging, the opportunity, it just all ends in one night, major disappointment. No payout, no momentum, no statement. And that's the risk that you take here. But that's also what makes this so compelling. Because you zoom out for a second, this isn't just an Oklahoma basketball story. This is where the sport is going. The Crown is challenging the structure of postseason basketball. It's asking a fundamental question. What do players value more, tradition or opportunity? And right now, Oklahoma just gave you an answer. They chose opportunity. They chose exposure. They chose compensation. And if it works, if they make a run, if they win this thing, if it helps them retain players and build towards next season, you're going to see more programs follow this, and you're going to see them follow pretty quickly. This is not a consolation tournament. This is not a footnote to March Madness. This is legitimately a pivot point for Oklahoma, for Porter Moser, maybe even for the sport itself, because the Sooners just made a bet. Not just on winning games in Las Vegas, but on what winning looks like in college basketball now. And starting April 1st, well, we're going to find out if they're right. Hang with this. We're going to talk more, change some gears from basketball, and really step into spring football right after this.
Zootopia 2 has come home to Disney+.
Let's go!
Get ready for a new case.
We're the greatest partners of all time!
New friends.
Gary the Snake.
And your last name?
The Snake.
Dream Team.
New habitats.
Zootopia has a secret reptile population.
You can watch the record-breaking phenomenon at home. Zootopia 2, now available on Disney+, rated PG. And right now you can get Disney Plus and Hulu for just $4.99 a month for 3 months with a special limited time offer. Ends March 24th. After 3 months, plan auto-renews at $12.99 a month. Terms apply.
All right, so let's shift gears here, because while Oklahoma basketball is making that statement in March, the reality in Norman is this. The next season is already being built. Spring football is underway for Oklahoma. And if this first segment was about a program choosing its future, then this segment right here is about whether Oklahoma football can sustain what it built in 2025. Because make no mistake, after a run to the college football playoff, the question around this program has changed just a little bit. It's no longer can you get there, it's can you stay there. And right now, I think there are three major things to watch this spring that's going to help determine that answer. The first thing is this. You got a defensive front seven we're going to see it be rebuilt in real time. And you start where Brent Venables always starts, right? Defense, specifically the front seven. Because what Oklahoma lost up front, it's not minor, right? It's not rotational. They lost some foundational pieces up there. We're talking about replacing names like Grayson Halton, R. Mason Thomas, Dominique Williams, Marvin Jones Jr., guys who weren't just starters, they were also tone setters. This was a unit that led the nation in tackles for loss and finished at the top in sacks. That kind of production doesn't just walk out the door without consequences. So what does spring practice become? Well, it becomes a proving ground. You've got former five-star talent like David Stone, Jaden Jackson now stepping into I don't want to say stepping into the spotlight because these guys have been in the spotlight since they were freshmen, but they are the dudes now. There's no one ahead of them. There's no seasoned veteran above them in terms of, them being the underclassmen. They are now the upperclassmen. So can they anchor a defensive front in this conference? Those guys. Can they handle double teams consistently with maybe less rotational pieces around them? Can they disrupt things consistently without those predecessors there on the team? And you look also on the edge. I mean, you've got some competition in the spring that's going to be fun to watch right there. You got PJ Adebawore, high upside player working his way back. Danny Okoye for a starting role opposite Taylor Wine. That's not just about who starts. It's about whether Oklahoma can maintain its identity as a disruptive attacking defense. Because if the front falters, we know this. We've seen this story before with Oklahoma football. If the front falters, everything behind it gets exposed. And that brings pressure to the second level. I think the second thing you got to look at here this spring for Oklahoma is linebacker depth. And this may be the most quietly concerning position group on the roster after being a position of strength and depth in 2025. Not because of what's on the top. That top level is outstanding. But then you look at everything behind it. You still got the centerpiece in Kip Lewis, a player who understands the system. He plays fast. He plays physical. And you bring in someone like Cole Sullivan from Michigan to help stabilize things. But beyond that, it's highly unproven. And that's I think that's putting it kindly. Sammy Almasigo, he's gone. Kobe McKenzie's gone. Owen Heineke, 90% is probably gone. So you lost experience. You lost depth. You lost versatility. It's all gone. So between the NFL, between the transfer portal, between the eligibility, scandals with Heineke, that room, it got thin in a hurry. So now spring practice becomes less about competition and really just more about survival. So names like James Nesta, Taylor Hine, Marcus James, they're not just developmental names anymore. They're necessary guys because in Brent Venables' system, this is important. Linebackers, they don't just fill gaps. They orchestrate the defense. They communicate. They adjust. They carry the mental load of a scheme that is as complex as any in college football. So if that group isn't ready, you're not just losing tackles. You're losing part of the structure of your defense. Now, we got to talk offense. Okay, I said three things. First two things are about defense. But let's turn the page here for number three. Let's talk a little bit about offense, going to the other side of the ball. Because here's the truth about Oklahoma in 2025. The defense got the Sooners to the playoff. I don't think anybody's going to dispute that. The defense got them to the playoff, and the offense didn't have the capability of taking them any further than that. And everything with this offense, I know people want to talk about quarterback. They want to talk about running back. They want to talk about wide receiver, tight end. But I think you got to start the conversation up front because the offensive line is going to return 4 starters. And that sounds like stability. That sounds like continuity. But if you dig a little bit deeper, I think still what you're going to see here is youth. Michael Fasusi, Ryan Foji. Yeah, talented guys, experienced at an elite SEC level, I don't think we can say that. I think you say they're still developing. And last year exposed that. Oklahoma's run game struggled, 112th nationally. That's not just a number, that's a problem. Because when you can't run the football consistently in this league, everything becomes more difficult. Third downs get longer. Play action losses, it just, you lose your bite on play action. Quarterbacks, they get hit more often. So this spring, it's about chemistry. It's about physical development. It's about whether this group can go from promising to reliable. Because if they can't, it doesn't matter who's carrying the ball. And speaking of that, the backfield, another question mark. All right, you've got Xavier Robinson, you've got Torrey Blaylock, your 1-2 punch coming back, and then you got transfer players around them. But still, as much as I love Xavier Robinson, as much as I love Torrey Blaylock, this offense at the running back position has yet to establish a star running back. Just hasn't happened yet. And that puts even more pressure on John Mateer in the quarterback position. Specifically keeping your starting quarterback upright and supported. And I think that leads you to maybe the under the radar storyline of the spring. It's not John Mateer. He's the guy, right? He is the guy. Undoubtedly, whether you love him, whether you hate him, whether you're indifferent, he is the guy going into 2026. But who's behind him? When you look behind John Mateer, right now what you're going to see is uncertainty. Michael Hawkins Jr., he's gone. You're looking at a freshman and Bo Bentley, probably, potentially stepping into that number 2 role. And I don't think it matters. Speaking of Bo Bentley, I've heard people say, well, you're going to play him just enough to get experience, but not enough to burn the red shirt. I don't think you have to look at that anymore. I think Bo Bentley, you look at this is a 3-year guy. Whether you redshirt him or whether you don't, potentially in this dude right here, he's a 3-year dude. So I don't know that you gain anything from redshirting here because I don't know that he's going to be around. If he lives up to the hype, especially in the Arbuckle offense, I don't know that Bo Bentley's more than 3 years on campus. But, I mean, you're looking at a true freshman coming in to be your QB2, and that matters, particularly in the SEC. That matters more than maybe what people want to admit. Because look, it's not if you need your backup, it's when. And here's what all of this adds up to. Spring football at Oklahoma this year, it's not about installing plays. It's about replacing a standard, because last year the program proved that it could compete at the highest level in the country. It proved that it could line up with anybody and it could act like it belonged there. But now you have to sustain that, and that's more difficult. That's where programs either become consistent contenders or they take a step back. And right now, Oklahoma is walking that line. You've got elite talent. You've got a proven head coach in Brent Venables. You've got momentum, but you've also got questions, real questions. You've got questions in the trenches. You got questions at linebacker. You got questions along the offensive line. And those are not luxury positions. Those are the foundational positions of who you are. So if you're looking for what matters this spring, don't get distracted by the highlight plays. Don't overreact to one scrimmage or some things that show up on Twitter. Watch for development. Watch for the depth chart. Watch who emerges when the spotlight is not on. Because what Oklahoma is building right now is the difference between being a 1-year playoff team and becoming a program that lives there in the playoffs. You know, Oklahoma softball is probably the most dangerous team in all of the sport right now. I'm going to tell you why right after this.
Start your day with Quaker Protein Instant Oatmeal. The instant oatmeal ready to help you tackle whatever your day brings. Like wrangling your toddler into their car seat. That was fun. Coaching your 6th graders soccer team. Go girls! And carrying all the groceries in one trip. Whew. Try Quaker Protein Instant Oatmeal, Granola, and Bars. Great taste and a good source of protein. Quaker, bring out the good.
Let's talk about the most dangerous team in college softball. Not the highest ranked team, not the most talked about team, but the most dangerous team in college softball. Because right now, that distinction belongs to the Oklahoma Sooners. And what makes this version of Oklahoma so fascinating is that they might actually be harder to beat than the teams behind them, I guess the teams ahead of them, that were winning national titles. Now think about that for just a second. We're talking about a program that has defined dominance over the last decade plus. A program that has lived at number one, that has stacked championships, that has built an identity around overwhelming power and relentless offense. And yet here we are in 2026. They've dropped as low as number 6 in some polls. They're definitely not the unanimous number 1. And somehow they feel even more inevitable. What I mean by that is this. Let's start with what we know, okay? This is the difference in the country right now. People, again, on our social media, they haven't played anybody. They have. I'm sorry that they don't play a top 25 team every time they take the field, but ask Auburn if they think Oklahoma is the real deal. Ask Arizona if they think that Oklahoma is the real deal. Ask Arizona State. Ask Duke. All ranked teams that Oklahoma has not just played, but beaten soundly. So it doesn't matter what you think their schedule is. What matters is that they're hitting over 450 as a team. What matters is that they lead the nation in home runs. They're averaging nearly 14 runs per game. So yeah, the power is still there. It is overwhelming. It is relentless. It is game-breaking power. Look at Kendall Wells, true freshman, sitting at 22 home runs on the season. That's not just leading the country. That is pacing her way towards history. But that's not the part that should concern everyone. Everyone else in the sport should maybe be concerned about the fact that Oklahoma doesn't need a home run. They don't need to beat you with the long ball. They can and they will, but they don't need to. And that's something that's fairly new here for this program, because if you go back to previous Oklahoma teams, as dominant as they were, the identity was clear. They're going to pressure you, they're going to overwhelm you, and eventually they're going to break you with power. But now they're just going to beat you however you let them. They let you pick, right? Well, you go back to that sweep of Auburn. And we saw it 15-0, dismantling of the Memphis Tigers this last week. So if the ball's flying, they're going to hit it out. But if the ball's not, they're going to manufacture runs. Aggressive base running, situational hitting, pressure on the defense, forcing mistakes, turning singles into rallies. We've seen that in the Auburn series. And that's the evolution of this team. Then they can turn around and do like what they did to Memphis on Wednesday night. And that's why the analysts are calling this version of Oklahoma scary. Because when you take an offense that was already historic and then you remove its dependency on one specific way of scoring, you don't make it less dangerous. You make it scary good. Not just good, scary good. And here's the thing. The SEC was supposed to slow this dynasty down. It was supposed to slow this program down, and it's not. Let's talk about the environment that they're operating in right now, because this is going to matter for June. When they moved to this conference, it wasn't supposed to make things easier, right? What it was supposed to do, it was supposed to expose them. They were supposed to face more elite pitching, which they do. They were supposed to face deeper lineups, which they do. They were supposed to face weekend series that feel like postseason games. They do. And early on, there were signs of adjustment, right? The pitching gave up some runs against Auburn right now, the last weekend. There were moments where you could see the difference in competition, but then what happens? Oh yeah, they lead the weekend with a sweep over a top 25 conference opponent. They tighten things up in the circle. They're sitting right now at 29-2 on the season. 3-0 in conference play, riding an 18-game winning streak. Oh, yeah. And by the way, they are the defending SEC conference champions. This is what makes Oklahoma different from most programs. They don't just survive challenges, they absorb them. Because the reality of the SEC is this: every weekend is going to be a test. There are no off days in conference play. There is no easy series. With all due respect, there's no Kansas in this conference. There's no time to reset against weaker competition. And while you might look at that as a way that's going to cost you a game here or there in March, it prepares you for something far more important than 1 or 2 games in conference. It prepares you for Oklahoma City for the Women's College World Series, because when you get to Oklahoma City, you're not facing anything that you haven't already seen. You've already seen elite arms. You've already seen pressure-packed environments. You've already faced other teams with championship expectations. And for Oklahoma, the SEC, it's not a hurdle. It is a sharpening stone. Now, here's where I think when you look at this team overall for 2026, here's where this might make them better built for the postseason than some of the championship teams that we've seen before them. Because Oklahoma they don't have one dominant ace. And that, again, we've talked about it. That's intentional. What Patty Gasso and the staff, what they're evolving into is a true committee. Look at the arms: Audrey Lowry, Sydney Brazone, Molly Wachino, multiple arms, different looks, different strengths. And yeah, there were some early bumps. There was some inconsistency, as people like to bring up on our Facebook page. There was some adjustment to SEC level, SEC type lineups. But recently they've stabilized. Look at the schedule. You see shutouts, you see control, you see efficiency, and more importantly, you see flexibility. Because in the postseason, relying on one arm, it becomes a liability. Look at Texas Tech. Fatigue sets in, matchups tighten, margins shrink. But when you can throw multiple pitchers at opponents, when you can adjust game to game, inning to inning, you become way more difficult to game plan against. You become more difficult to wear down. You become more difficult to beat. And when you pair that with this offense that Oklahoma has right now, you don't need perfection in the circle. You just need consistency. Now let's address, if we're talking about Oklahoma softball, there's an elephant in the room. Okay, there is. And again, I know we keep throwing it out there. We're charging towards 18,000 followers. Check us out on Facebook, because this gets brought up. The rankings. You got number 4 in one poll. You got number 6 in another poll. For most programs, that's validation. But for Oklahoma, that's just noise. Because history is going to tell us something very clear about this program. They don't need to be number 1 in March in order to win in June. In fact, some of their most dominant postseason runs have come after moments in the rankings like this. They've come after a loss. They've come after a dip. They've come after the perception of vulnerability. We saw it in 2024. That winning streak was snapped. And then what happened? Boom, champions. And we've seen it in years where they just don't go into the season, or they don't remain throughout the season a consensus favorite. And now you've got a team that lost last year in the Women's College World Series. They didn't finish the job. And you don't think that matters to them? You don't think that's something that's sitting right there in that locker room? This isn't a team trying to prove that they're good. This is a team that's on a mission. So when people ask, is Oklahoma still the team to beat? I think that's the wrong question. The better question is, do you actually want to play Oklahoma? I mean, are you looking forward to facing them? Because right now they check every box. Elite offense, check. Not one-dimensional either. A deep lineup, check. Not reliant on 1 or 2 stars. Flexible pitching, check. Not dependent on a single arm. A battle-tested schedule, check. Not inflated. And maybe most importantly, motivation. This isn't a team protecting a legacy. This is a team trying to reclaim it. So yeah, we're still in March. There's still a lot of softball left to be played. The SEC is going to continue to challenge this team. There will be close games. There may be even, most likely, more losses on the schedule. But if you're looking ahead to Oklahoma City, if you're thinking about who you trust in a 3-game stretch when, in a pressure moment with everything on the line, it's really hard not to come back to the Oklahoma Sooners because they may not be ranked number 1 right now, but they're playing like a team nobody wants to see when it matters most. And that's what makes them the most dangerous team in all of college softball.
LinkedIn is pretty great at a lot of things, like helping you tap into the latest trends and insights in your field. We cannot stop your coworker from tapping her pencil. LinkedIn can help you find new jobs that align with your career goals. We cannot help you find the source of that weird smell in the office fridge. Ew. And while we can't stop your coworkers from bringing their hobbies into the office, LinkedIn can help you bring your career to the next level. LinkedIn is the network that works for you.
Let's move back to football, close out this episode by talking about the future. And not just any future. We're talking about what could become one of the most important recruiting classes in the history of Oklahoma football, certainly in the history of the Brent Venables tenure. Because right now, as we sit here, March 20th, 2026, the class 7, it's not just trending well, it is trending historically. And the question isn't just, is this a good class? The question is, are we watching the foundation of the next championship era in Norman? Let's start with the obvious. Right now, you're sitting on 19 commitments in March, 9 months away from signing day. That alone puts Oklahoma in a completely different category than the rest of the country. Most programs right now, they're sitting on 4, 5, maybe 6 commitments. Oklahoma has built nearly an entire class before most schools have even gotten started and picked up momentum. But here's where you have to be careful, because volume can be misleading. You can stack numbers early and it inflates your rankings. But that's not what is happening in Norman. This class, it's not just big. This class is also loaded. You've got multiple blue chip prospects. You got a blue chip ratio that already clears the threshold of what championship teams are built on. You got top 100 players. You've got multiple 5-star commitments. And more importantly, there are some cornerstone guys in this class. So you talk about Cooper Hackett. You talk about Caden Penny, 2 of the top offensive tackles in the state. 5-star guys. They're locked in, and they're locked in early. That's not normal. Programs usually fight until the very end of a cycle to land 1 elite tackle. Yet Oklahoma has landed 2 before the summer even arrives. That's how you build something sustainable. That's how you protect quarterbacks. That's how you win in the SEC. And what stands out about this group is not just who they've landed, though. It's how they're building it. It's not random. That you can see the intentionality here. You look at a player like Seneca Driver, right? The number 1 tight end in the country. That is a position of versatility. It's a matchup nightmare. Someone who changes how a defense will line up. Then you look at Cooper Witten, top-ranked linebacker. You look at the leadership. You look at the defensive identity. You look at the kind of player you build a system around. You got speed. You got real speed. I mean, look, if we're going to talk about speed, Damari DeZerm, 10.3 200-meter guy. You don't fake that. That's track verified, game breaking, ankle breaking, angle erasing speed. And when you start stacking that kind of athletic profile across the entire class, look, you're not just recruiting talent. You're recruiting traits. You're building a roster that reflects where the sport is going. Faster, more versatile, more explosive. It's not accidental. That's a staff that understands the evolution of college football. And something to look at here, and I think this might be the most important development out of all when you're looking at this 2027 class, because recruiting is not just about who you land, it's about who you beat to land these guys. And right now, Oklahoma's going head to head with the biggest brands in the sport, and they're winning. They're winning battles that they used to lose. Look, they flipped Cooper Hackett. They pulled Taven Epps away from Texas. They're going into talent-rich areas. They're going into California. They're going into Alabama. And they're coming out with commitments. And that didn't always happen across a class of this magnitude. But now, I mean, look, that SEC logo, it matters. The exposure of a college football playoff appearance, it matters. The trajectory of a program matters. And when you combine that with the relationships that Brent Venables and his staff are building, you're starting to see a shift. And we've talked so much about the value of these relationships. You're seeing it pay off. This is not Oklahoma trying to keep up. This is Oklahoma stepping into the same recruiting tier as a Georgia, as a Alabama, and going toe to toe. But you do, I think, need to pump the brakes just a little bit here. I mean, no one's more excited about this class than I am, but let's tread lightly for just a little bit, because if we're going to do this right, I think you have to talk about the other side. I think there are two real concerns with this class. The first, like we talked about it earlier, it's the volume effect. When you have 19 commitments this early, you're naturally going to be ranked number one. That's just how the system works. But as the cycle progresses, other programs, they're going to add, they're going to get their own elite players. They're going to get their 5 stars. They're going to be late risers in this class. There's going to be guys who flip. And that gap, we're going to see it close. So the question becomes, can Oklahoma hold that number one spot? Or is this class going to settle into something more like a top 3 or a top 5? Still elite, but maybe not historic the way it's looking right now. I think the second concern when you look at this class is defensive interior. You're missing out on a guy like Jalen Brewster, right? And I know Jalen Brewster is not rock solid at Texas Tech right now, but he appears to be. So there's difference makers in the trenches that Oklahoma didn't get. But to their credit, they did respond. They landed guys like Elijah Harmon, guys like Devin Robertson, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with those two dudes. But if you're trying to build a truly elite class, one that defines an era, you got to keep stacking interior defensive guys that are difference makers. Because championships in this conference, they're one up front. We talked about that earlier in the podcast. And the big picture here is that I think this feels different with this class because it is. I mean, here's what stands out when you step back. This isn't just a hot start for Oklahoma. This is structural. At the same point last year, Oklahoma's 2026 class was sitting somewhere in the mid-teens nationally. Right now, though, they're number one with multiple 5 stars, with nearly 20 commitments, with a national footprint that stretches from California all the way into the Southeast. So we're not talking about coincidence, we're talking about evolution. This is what it looks like when a program fully transitions into its SEC era. They're going into year 3. So we're not talking about just what's happening on the field, but we're talking about recruiting strategy. We're talking about geographic reach. We're talking about brand power. So when you think about the 2027 class in March, 9 months out, almost, here's where I land on this. Is it too early to call this the greatest recruiting class in Oklahoma history? Yes. There's too much time left. There's too many variables. There's too many battles that are still going to be fought. But it is fair to say that this is the best foundation Oklahoma has probably ever had this early into a recruiting cycle. I absolutely believe that. I will stand on that hill and fight you for it. And if Oklahoma closes this out, you land a few more priority targets, they hold on to this core, then you're not just talking about a great class. You're talking about a class that could define the next 5 years of Oklahoma football. And maybe, just maybe, the next championship run in Norman. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Sooner Nation podcast. Again, thanks so much for those of you that are finding us on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, on Apple Podcasts. Thank you for your downloads. Thank you for your likes. Thank you for your subscribes. You can find us every day, heartland-sports.com. Got some great Oklahoma City Thunder coverage going there as well, in addition to the Sooners. Find us on Facebook, Heartland Sports. Like I said, we're approaching 18,000 followers on our Facebook page. We even have subscription content that you can get in on that takes our conversations just a little bit deeper with some analysis, opinions. We got a lot of stuff going on. Whether you're with us part-time or every day you check us out, thank you for being a part of our family at Heartland Sports, and thanks for listening to the Sooner Nation podcast. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Boomer Sooner.
But I would walk 500 miles and I would walk 500 more to be the man who walked 1,000 miles to fall down at your door. When I'm working, yes, I know I'm gonna be the man who's working hard for you.